This is the first set of notes over evolution. Evolution means change over time, and what we're really studying here is the process by which modern organisms have descended from ancient ones. And we owe a lot of what we think about and understand about evolution, evolutionary theory today to a man named Charles Darwin. Okay, Charles Darwin was an English naturalist. He was from a very wealthy family in England, and he went to college. First of all, his father wanted him to be a doctor, but he didn't couldn't take medical school and wasn't interested in medicine, and so he ended up studying to be a clergyman or a minister. But he could also take courses that were interesting to him, and he had always liked the natural world and nature and science. And so he took a lot of those kind of things. And when he finished college, he got the opportunity to go on a mapping mission on one of the British Navy ships, the HMS Beagle, and their task was to map the coast of South America and then also travel the rest of the way around the world. And so while they were doing the mapping part of their exercise, taking the measurements for the mapping, they put Darwin ashore, and he um, was able to observe and collect and draw pictures and visit people and discover things. He saw all different kinds of animals and plants, some of which were very similar to plants and animals he'd seen in Europe, others which were similar in some ways and very different in others. He saw fossils of animals that had been that had died many, many years ago, and saw the similarity that some of them had to present day animals in that particular part of the world. He saw geologic features he hadn't had the opportunity to see before, and experienced an earthquake. And when they traveled to the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America, he saw on those islands, on the series of islands, the same sorts of animals and plants, but ones that were very different based on what the habitat was where they were. And so there were turtles that were different. They were similar in some ways, and when he studied them more, he found they were probably descended from the same ancestors. But they were very different based on what they had to feed on the islands. So as he returned from the journey and began to catalog his collections and start working on his notes, he began to put together the idea of what might have produced modern day species, and we call that Darwin's theory of natural selection. So here's the 4 points of Darwin's theory of natural selection. First of all, there's variety in populations. A population is a collection of members of the same species who live in a particular area. And within any population, whether it's people or beetles, as you see in the picture here, there's going to be variation. They're not going to be just alike. The variation that is there is inherited from the parents of those organisms and is passed on to their offspring. So there's variety that is inherited. Secondly, more offspring are produced than can survive. We see this oftentimes in animals like fish and in plants like peas. They produce a lot more offspring than will survive to reproduce. Again, in other words, there's a struggle for existence, whether they're being eaten by other animals, whether there is not enough food around to feed them and they die off. There are various reasons that they might not survive, but of the hundreds of eggs produced by fish when they spawn, probably only a few of them ever reach adulthood. So there is definitely a struggle for existence. Thirdly, each of these organisms, because of the variations within the population, have either advantages or disadvantages in that struggle for existence. The ones with the most helpful of variations are called the fittest. That was the term that Darwin used, called survival of the fittest. The ones that are most fit to survive are the ones that are going to reproduce. And they're the ones that can pass on their variations or their adaptations to their offspring. And so over time, these variations or adaptations will um, multiply or collect and eventually lead to the species changing over time, and that is what evolution is. The fourth point in Darwin's theory is that the species alive today are descended with modification from ancestral species. Now, the ones that arrive today have adaptations or traits that have made them more successful in their environment. So what is natural selection? It is selection that happens in nature without any influence of people. That would be artificial selection. Now, there were other scientists who had the same kind of ideas around the same time, and there were a number of them that contributed to Darwin's thoughts. One such scientist was Alfred Russel Wallace, and another was Lamarck. But Lamarck had an erroneous idea, and that was that the evolution was a product of the use or disuse of organs. So whenever you had something that you did a lot and acquired some kind of characteristic during the course of your lifetime, he felt that you could pass those on to your offspring. And of course, we realize today that that's incorrect because acquired characteristics are not inherited. If you cut off the tails of rats, it doesn't mean their offspring would be tailless. If you develop some kind of characteristic during the course of your lifetime, that doesn't mean that your offspring will have it. And so Lamarck, although he was a very intelligent and very brilliant man and had most everything correct about his theory of evolution, this is the one thing he had wrong, and that's unfortunately what he's remembered for today. This concludes the first part of notes on evolution.